Now let's dig into the third and last major topic of Unit 1, the impact of European colonization on the Americas. First, let's compare the interactions between different European countries and Native Americans. The Spanish were like strict landlords focused on Christianizing and exploiting Native Americans through forced labor and a rigid racial hierarchy. They were the landlords who never let you be late with rent and had a ton of rules. The French and the Dutch were more like friendly neighbors, developing strong trade relations. The English started off cooperative but quickly moved to policies of displacement or extermination as differences emerged. They were the neighbors who started off with a friendly wave and ended with a property dispute. The Spanish wasted no time in conquering the Aztec Empire in Central America and the Inca Empire in South America. Thanks to their superior military technology and devastating diseases, these mighty civilizations crumbled faster than a house of cards in a windstorm. Large numbers of Native Americans perished, and survivors were forced into labor under the encomienda system. When diseases caused a labor shortage, Spain turned into African slaves through the hacienda system to fill the gap. Spanish colonists had a strict social hierarchy, pure-blooded Spaniards at the top, mixed heritage individuals in the middle, and Native Americans and Africans at the bottom. This exploitation led to resistance like the Pueblo Revolt in the late 17th century, which temporarily booted the Spanish out of New Mexico for over a decade. It took Spain nearly half a century to reclaim New Mexico fully. Eventually, the Spanish authorities made some concessions, allowing Native American traditions as long as they attended Mass. It was a bit like saying you can dance to your own tune, but only if you show up for Sunday choir practice. Meanwhile, Spain's Protestant rivals spread the Black Legend, a narrative exaggerating Spanish cruelty towards Native Americans. While there were elements of truth, it was an overgeneralization. Think of it as the 16th century version of a tabloid scandal, juicy but not entirely accurate. The French maintained better relations with Native Americans by focusing on trade rather than conquest. They swapped fur with firearms and alcohol, fostering relatively amicable relations. French missionaries, especially Jesuits, preferred peaceful conversion through example rather than force. They were like, we'll just lead by example and hope you follow along. After the Edict of Nantes ended religious wars in France, Catholicism remained the official religion, and Protestant emigration was restricted to avoid conflicts. The French in Quebec formed alliances with the Algonquins and Hurons. Ensuring their colonies' survival. The Dutch The Dutch, like the French, focused on trade alliances, but eventually got into violent conflicts with coastal natives. Their colonies were fewer, often located near trading posts along major rivers or the coast. The Dutch were like the cool, laid-back cousins who just wanted to set up shop and trade, but sometimes things got a little heated. The English in North America got a huge helping hand from Native Americans in the early days of colonization. Native Americans taught the clueless colonists how to grow corn, hunt in the forests, and find basic survival resources in harsh environments. It was like a survival reality show, but with real stakes. Picture Survivor Colonial Edition, where the prize is not dying of starvation, but the English, being the overachievers they were, had a stronger desire to settle in North America compared to other Europeans. They started adopting policies of displacement and land appropriation for growing tobacco and other cash crops, which naturally led to Native American resistance. Check out this illustration of the English settlement at Jamestown. They built strong palisades to protect their claimed land. Native tribes like the Powhatan weren't too thrilled and attacked colonial villages around Jamestown, killing hundreds of settlers. King Philip's War in the late 17th century highlighted the intense conflicts between Native Americans and English colonists. Although the colonists eventually defeated Native Americans, the resistance inflicted severe blows on the English. And mutual retaliation led to brutal and merciless consequences for both sides. English colonies attracted people not only from England but also from other parts of Europe. After seizing land from Native Americans, the colonists focused on agriculture and lived separately from the native population. It was like setting up your own exclusive neighborhood and putting up a no trespassing sign. Religious differences added fuel to the fire. The English saw Native Americans as heathens, and gradually Puritans saw them as agents of the devil, threatening their godly society. On the flip side, Native Americans viewed the English as invaders who threatened their way of life. It was a cultural clash of epic proportions, with each side viewing the other as the ultimate party crasher. In summary, each European power had its own colonial playbook with varying strategies and outcomes. Whether through friendly trade, strict control, or outright displacement, the European colonization of the Americas reshaped the continent and set the stage for centuries of change. Given the diverse colonial approaches and interests of Europeans, Native Americans had to get creative with their survival strategies. They formed alliances with different European powers to counteract their enemies. Imagine it as the ultimate season of survivor America, with tribes in Mexico allying with the Spanish to resist the oppressive Aztecs, and Native Americans in the Ohio River Valley teaming up with the French to fend off English settlers. Another strategy was to migrate westward to avoid European settlers, which often led to conflicts with tribes already residing in those regions. Tribal loyalty was strong, and Native Americans didn't see themselves as part of a larger unified group, but as members of distinct tribes. This lack of unity provided an advantage to European colonial expansion until the increasing threat from Europeans prompted a broader sense of North American identity. Alright, after discussing the diverse interactions between indigenous people and Europeans, let's dive into the Columbian exchange. This concept refers to the global spread of plants, food crops, animals, people, and disease pathogens following the arrival of Columbus and other European navigators in the Americas. Think of it as history's most intense potluck dinner, where everyone brought something to the table, and some of it was really bad for you. In terms of biological exchange, due to the relative independence of the eastern and western hemispheres before Columbus, many organisms evolved along different paths. With the Columbian exchange, these organisms began to establish connections. Infectious diseases brought catastrophic and devastating impacts on the indigenous people of the Americas, causing their population to plummet drastically. This can be considered the most severe population disaster in world history. In the 300 years after Europeans began maritime exploration, more than 100 million people might have died from diseases brought to the Americas and Oceania by Europeans. 90% of the indigenous population of the Americas perished within 100 years. Diseases like smallpox and measles had established some level of immunity in the eastern hemisphere, but the indigenous people of the Americas lacked these immune genes. In the eastern hemisphere, although these diseases were still spreading, the impact was relatively limited. They primarily harmed a certain number of infants and young children, but survivors acquired immunity through early exposure. As those who did not survive were mostly infants and young children, adults who contributed most to social and economic production were less affected. Therefore, the overall destructive power of these infectious diseases on society was limited. Epidemics combined with violent conflicts brought by Europeans reduced the indigenous population on the modern U.S. territory from at least 5 million in 1492 to 600,000 by 1800. By 1800, the European descended population in the U.S. was nearly 5 million, and there were about 1 million African descended people forcibly brought to America as slaves. 1 million European immigrants crossed the ocean to North America during the 17th and 18th centuries, creating a population landscape completely different from that of 1492. The densely populated areas were hit hardest by epidemics. For example, the Aztec Empire's population plummeted from about 17 million to 1.3 million in a century, while Spanish colonists imposed their empire on the devastated Mexican society. The impact of viruses and epidemics on the indigenous population was a key factor in the European invaders' expansion in the Americas. This point was humorously and poignantly emphasized in the 2018 stand-up show John Leguizamo's Latin History for Morons, where comedian John Leguizamo highlights the existence of infectious diseases in European colonization of the Americas. It's like the universe threw in a cheat code for the Europeans, but at a massive cost to the indigenous peoples. After the indigenous population drastically decreased, the Americas were like a massive empty farm with too few laborers to till the soil. Consequently, the Portuguese and other Europeans started importing enslaved African labor to the Americas. This not only had a huge impact on Africa's population and economy, but also introduced a workforce that would shape the future of agriculture in the New World. Later, when Europeans reached Pacific Islands, they brought similar but relatively smaller scale devastating impacts on the island natives. This dual approach of virus plus violence by Europeans caused immense suffering for indigenous people in the Americas and Pacific Islands. It's a tragic chapter in history that reads more like a horror story than a historical text. From a long-term and global perspective, although infectious diseases caused population decline, the Columbian exchange ultimately increased rather than decreased the world's population due to the global spread of edible plants and animals. On one hand, the widespread dissemination of edible species made people's diets generally more nutritious, contributing to continued world population growth. Imagine the world's biggest potluck where everyone brought their best dishes. Wheat and sugar from Eurasia made their way to the Americas, while Africa contributed yams, okra, kale, and coffee. High protein and high fat food sources like dairy products and livestock from Europe significantly increased food energy supply in the Americas. Many crops were also transmitted from the Americas to the Eastern Hemisphere. Corn and potatoes were like the original superfoods, significantly increasing calorie intake in the Eurasian continent. Corn became a superhero in agriculture, thriving in places unsuitable for rice and millet in China. Potato arrived like an energy bomb in Europe and Africa, becoming an important staple food and boosting population growth. These crops were the MVPs of the global diet revolution. Additionally, juicy tomatoes, flavorful peppers, fragrant papaya, and sweet pineapples enriched Eurasian diets with colors and fresh tastes. Besides the joy on the palate, there was also the medicinal plant quinine from South America. As the first effective treatment for malaria, quinine was like a miracle drug for malaria patients and a crucial survival aid for European colonizers in tropical regions. Aside from edible plants and animals, some introduced species like horses significantly changed the hunting practices of the Plains Indians in the Americas. Horses turned hunting into a highly specialized and dangerous activity, allowing hunters to cover larger areas and chase faster prey. From the Americas, tobacco was introduced to the Eastern Hemisphere. Initially advertised as a health product, when brought back to Europe, tobacco is now known as a health killer, with a quarter of smokers worldwide dying from smoking-related causes. It's a classic case of short-term pleasure, long-term health consequences. The exchange of plant and animal species between the hemispheres also brought invasive species problems. For example, dandelions from Europe, with their superpowers, occupied open and wasteland areas in the Americas, crowding out native plants and becoming a supervillain in American agriculture, impacting crop growth and increasing weeding costs. And pigs, introduced by Europeans, thrived in suitable environments without natural predators, rapidly forming wild populations in the Caribbean, like on Barbados Islands. These wild pigs competed for food resources with native wildlife, reducing the numbers of some local species. The Columbian Exchange wasn't just about swapping plants and animals. It was like his history's greatest yard sale, competing with crucial technologies and tools. Picture this: the wheel rolls in Americas, and suddenly transportation is a breeze, like the original Uber, but without surge pricing. Iron farming tools like plows, hoes, and sickles made agricultural productivity soar, turning small farms into mega farms. And then there's gunpowder technology brought by Europeans, which added a whole new dimension to conflicts, like introducing fireworks to a rock, paper, scissors game, greatly altering the military landscape of Native American societies. The Columbian Exchange also introduced the movement of people, both voluntary and forced migrations. Europeans settled in the Americas, and Africans were forcibly brought by Europeans to perform various labor tasks. African brought important farming knowledge and significantly influenced American music with their rhymes and singing styles, laying the foundation for much of the music we love today. Meanwhile, Europeans to justify slavery, cited biblical passages and developed theories claiming biological inferiority of Africans, making this enslavement acceptable. It was the worst kind of creative writing class. Colonization in the Americas also significantly impacted Europe, primarily in the transition from feudal system to capitalist economies. New crops provided more food sources and nutrition, boosting European population growth. It was like Europe suddenly discovered a magic pantry that never ran out. The wealth of minerals from Central and South America made the Iberian states rich, like swimming in gold coins rich. The increased trade and the development of joint stock companies laid the foundation for subsequent financial and commercial prosperity. Basically, Europe hit the jackpot and it changed the game forever. In summary, the history of the first 100 years after Europeans arrived in the Americas is like Europeans opening a massive blind box. The first part is about the indigenous lifestyle before opening the blind box. The second part is about why and how Europeans opened the blind box. And the third part is about the consequences after opening the blind box. And there you have it for Unit 1. See you next time.